let's talk a little bit more about your nightmare scenario.
Okay.
And
it was Eric Pincus who threw it out there.
He did. And we've continued it. And it is that, okay, you put Clay on the back burner. Clay signs with the Denver Nuggets, and they're a powerhouse in the West. And Paul George opts out tomorrow and signs with the Philadelphia 76ers on Sunday. You're sitting there with Chris Paul's contract on Sunday. You're like, better just waive him. And so there's no Chris, and there's no Clay, and there's no Paul, and there's no KCP. That's it. But boy, Andrew Wiggins is still on the team. So, Wiggs, we're expecting Wiggins this year to play hard for 82 games. If you get all that, and this is what I do think people are fairly worried about, because there's all this talk about Paul George, yet there's plenty of people in the know. Start with Ramona, who are like, that Paul George thing it's really probably not going to happen.
I had somebody pretty close to this describe this is more of a long shot, just because it's complicated, right? And, the Clippers, they don't have to do anything. They can just sit back and kind of dare him to leave. If they know their guy and they think he really just wants to stay in LA or stay on the West Coast, they don't have to trade him anywhere. The only thing that gets a little weird is if he opts in, and then we'll know that by Saturday, right? That's the opt-in day, the 29th. So if he opts in, then you go, well, that's kind of interesting. He can still do the extension with the Clippers. Then he kind of comes off the board for the cap space teams, unless they do a sign-and trade there. I think the Warriors obviously have interest in that.
Okay, so she says she's been told it's a little bit of a long shot. That led to this question. Hey, Ramona, what if it all goes wrong? What if plan A is not there? Plan B is not there? Then what?
How big of an overhaul can you do? How much is it about, giving other people different roles? How much is it about completely recasting the team? I think they have a lot of different plans. They put, A, B, C, D, E, F, right? I don't know where they are on the plans that might work or not work. Like I said on NBA Today the other day, name a high-profile trade target, a free agent. They've made some calls. Kevin Durant, they've called. Paul George, they've called. Right? I mean, this is where they are. Every big name, Larry Markkinen, they've called. But you can't make other people trade you things, the players, right? If they don't want to, you can't always find the right match there. So I think it's what can they actually pull off? We'll see.
Okay, and DeJounte Murray is already off the board.
Yep, and I think that Lauri Markkanen's going to get the max from Utah. He'll be off the board, and I think you're going to be left with possibly Brandon Ingram, maybe Kevin Durant, although Phoenix and the ownership is saying, oh, no, we like this. 3 guys making 50-plus and no playoff wins. The Paul George one is the one that everyone's eyes are on because, tomorrow he's got his deadline, and I would anticipate that he probably opts in. He opts in and says, all right, Clippers, the ball's in your court. What are you going to do now? I'm going to take my 48 for this year, 47.8. I'll play basketball. And if you're Paul George and you figure if you have a good year, there's going to be a marketplace for you next year when you're really a free agent and you can pick your destination. The only other piece of it would be if he wants to be a Warrior, then he tells the Clippers, look, I'll sign, I'm going to opt in. You're going to trade me to the Warriors. Good luck going to get whatever package you want to get from them. And I was looking at a Tim Kawakami tweet from a little bit ago and the idea of Jonathan Kuminga. Could you do the deal without Kuminga being in it? And I just don't see that scenario. So then it becomes, in the Warriors court, would you trade Jonathan Kuminga to get Paul George?
I bet they would.
So that to me is where all of this might boil down to that.
I don't like that. And I'm not saying I wouldn't support it. What I'm saying is I just really want Jonathan Kuminga to still be on the team.
Of course.
But I think they're that
committed,
motivated to help Steph.
Agreed.
Right now.
Agreed. It's funny you brought it back to Steph because we talked about LeBron and Bronny, and would Steph do that? No, of course not. Well, Cannon's only 5. Forget that part of it. If they go to Steph in all this and they say, well, Steph, I don't know if you saw the news, but Paul George opted in, and we've got a deal on the table. We're going to send Chris Paul. We're going to send Andrew Wiggins. We got to throw in Jonathan Kuminga for Paul George and whatever other Clipper you want to throw in. I could pull up the roster, but it's not important for the conversation.
Could also be a 3-team deal.
What does Steph say? Does Steph, not that he has the final right of refusal, but would Steph green light a trade that got rid of Kuminga? Chris Paul is going to be gone. Wiggins and Kuminga essentially for Paul George. Would he think that makes him better? Would that be something that he would sign off on? That for me is an interesting part of this.
I mean, okay, my base answer to your question is I think yes. However, sort of the concept you're talking about of Wiggins also being gone and Kuminga, and then I think the premise includes Klay Thompson just signing elsewhere on his own.
Right.
Well, now all your wings are gone. You just have Paul. That's it. So, the idea that Wiggins, if Wiggins goes, I think that opens the door for Kuminga to stay. If Kuminga goes, in an odd way, it opens the door for Wiggins to stay. I don't I don't know if you're so enamored with Paul George that you just decimate your roster. You're going to need some other good players.
Yeah.
Steph Curry and Paul George by themselves, that does not get you anywhere. And obviously Draymond Green, and you'd still have a Pods, a TJD. You're going to need more scoring than that, but maybe finances get created that you can do some things still out on the open market. I don't know.
Yeah, and maybe it's just Paul and Kuminga, and you throw in Looney to make the money work. And, that adds up to almost exactly what Paul George is making. And, you wind up keeping Wiggins because I think Wiggins has a much more of a diminished value. And you're right, you do need multiple wings. And then if you could somehow do something with Klay in a sign and trade, which I don't think is very likely either, but I just wonder about the Kuminga piece and all this. And you and I have gone back and forth all week about, the leverage of the Clippers and will they need to involve Kuminga in the deal over the next couple of days. If Paul George opts in, I think all eyes for me then go to a Clipper-Warrior trade.
I'm with you.
For me, it's Jonathan Kuminga. Would the Clippers accept a deal that doesn't have Kuminga in it?
I think right now they would say privately no.
Right.
But are they forced to? Because Paul's not going to go to them and say, I'd like a trade. He's going to say, I'd like a trade to the Warriors. You have to get me to the Warriors. All right. Well, now you're stuck a little bit. And the Warriors go, well, we're not doing Jonathan Kuminga. So leverage starts to move tomorrow in different directions. Here's Eric Pincus, Blazer Report on the Warriors' quote-unquote nightmare scenario.
If we just say, let's say that they just say, all right, Clay, love you, it's been great, see ya. And they say, Chris Paul, no trade, we're going to waive you. And they're keeping Kevon Looney. At this point, even if they don't keep Kevon Looney, they don't have any real money to spend, but they do have what's called the mid-level exception. They would have the large one that's just under 13.
So that's what I think as a Warrior fan you do not want to hear come Tuesday or Wednesday. It's like Chris Paul's gone, Clay's on the Nuggets, but we've got our mid-level.
Wah, wah. That's tough.
Let's go to Bobby in Oakland. Hi, Bobby. What are you doing?
Hey, good. Listen to you guys, man. Good conversation. And you know what? When I heard the two-year, $48 million early in the beginning of last year, I thought that was a generous offer. I thought Clay should have jumped on that. And okay, let's see how he turns out for the remainder of the year. And plus, he had his spots. But at the end of the year, although he had some good moments in the playoffs, we always know about the 0-10, but his defense has really suffered. So he's going to have limited options. I mean, maybe Orlando may offer him a 2-year, but he doesn't want to go to Philly. They will absolutely destroy him. If he wants to take to Denver, maybe they'll give him a 1-year. I don't know if Kai won't let him to come back to the Warriors. So with that said, turn to Paul George. I don't know what that's going to want to do. I think Paul George is going to want to stand with the Clippers. There's no way Steve Ballmer is going to open up a new building and at the last second let Paul George move. They're going to offer him something to keep him there. So we'll see how that turns out. So where does that leave us, right? Yeah, it leaves us with the young guys. It leaves us with the team that we had for the most part. Maybe have a free agent or two you can add in. I think the Warriors should start looking to the future. I mean, I don't know where it's gonna where you NBA seems to run out of players, impact players that you can go and get in free agency or trade. So they may have to look young and start building for the future, but that's where it's looking to me.
Yeah.
What you guys thoughts on that?
So, Bobby, here are my thoughts on that. Everything you just said is super reasonable. I can't stress this enough. I feel like I've said it 100 times already. Here comes number 101. Anybody who wants the Warriors to, quote, look to the future, they disagree vehemently. It doesn't mean they want to get rid of Kuminga and Podziemski. They want to keep good young players. That's not the point. The whole idea of it even looking or feeling that way would make Steph Curry throw up in his mouth. And therefore, it would make the Warrior brass throw up in their mouth. The whole reason that Klay Thompson is not going to be a Warrior, I believe, is because they won't, quote, look to the future. That may sound weird, but I mean it. You can go get Klay for relatively cheap. If you just wanted to look to the future, keep Klay, and you can develop guys and let the kumbaya with the big three on your way out the door. But the reason, as Ramona just said, the reason they're making every phone call is because they desperately still want to win. Desperately. So there is no, in my mind, there's no looking to the future. And if the roster ends up that way in 2 weeks, it's because everything else failed.
Right. And I do think that the Kuminga piece becomes a profound point on both of those, because if you do believe that he is a big piece for the future, and I think you could see his upside and say, yeah, this guy, he's got all-star potential. He can be a good number 2 on a very good team. If he's your best player, you're probably not a championship team unless he gets a lot better. But he, for me, is the pivot point, because if you trade him, that is one that could come back to bite you down the road. If he continues to progress into a great player, you might net something in the short term. It might be good enough to get you a title. But if it doesn't, that's one that could haunt you in the future.